are joining us from across the world. I see someone is all the way from Peru. We have folks from Orlando, Florida. So we are both excited and glad that you have joined us today. So use the chat feature to interact with each other and to interact with our presenter. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat or in the question and answers feature that is here. I will be checking those periodically. And then at the end, we will have a question and answer session where I will ask your questions to Deondre, and he would be more than glad to answer them. And again, thank you and welcome. And just one quick note, I am glad to have Deondre on today. I met him back in 2017 when he and his mother did a panel at USCA talking about we are family, mothers and sons navigating HIV together. And that panel definitely was something that impacted me and still impacts me as I am also navigating this virus with my mother as well. So I'm grateful for the work that he is doing and has done. And now I turn it over to you, Deondre. Welcome.
Thank you, Sean. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool, awesome. First, thank you to you for moderating this, and thank you to the Latino Commission on AIDS and Hands United for putting this all together and for having us here and also showing how important it is that we share this message and the movement to everyone that's out there. I appreciate that and also the kind words. So I'm going to get started and jump in here. I encourage everybody to use the chat box or better yet, the Q&A box you'll see at the bottom of your screen or the top for questions that I think that we'll get to at the end. And we'll be sure to try to answer as many as possible. So let's get started here. Back here. Okay. U equals you, the message in the movement. Again, my name is Deondre Moore. I am a part of the Prevention Access campaign staff as the U.S. Partnerships and Community Engagement Manager. I began my work with the Prevention Access campaign as an ambassador a little over a year ago, and then joined as a board member, and now am a staff person. And I absolutely love my job and everything about the staff and everyone involved with Prevention Access campaign. One of the first things I'm going to talk to you guys about very briefly is privilege and what privilege means and looks like for those of us that have actually been able to reach an undetectable viral load. So for me personally, as a Black queer man in the United States, I do recognize that I do still have some level of privilege because access to treatment for me was made readily available from the beginning of my diagnosis at the age of 19 because of my parents. I recently just came off of my parents' insurance because I made 26 this year, and having their insurance readily available for me, and also having parents who always spoiled me, made sure that I had everything that I needed in life, made things a lot easier and made access to treatment easier. They ensured that I had housing, transportation, finances. Everything was always made easier for me, but that's not always the case for other people out there in the United States and anywhere that you might be. And it's important that we recognize our privilege so that we know what privilege looks like and we know what the lack of privilege looks like for those who may have not yet been able to reach an undetectable viral load, so that we can address the issues at hand as to why they might have not been able to reach that undetectable viral load. 400,000 is the estimated number of persons here in the United States who have not yet been able to access treatment, but have a positive diagnosis. And this number is important to us because we care about these people. These people matter, and it's imperative to their health and to the overall movement of ending this epidemic that we identify these persons and we help them to get into care and provide them with the resources that they need so that they can live a healthy and happy life. So let's talk a little bit about what undetectable equals untransmittable actually means. So being undetectable means that a person living with HIV who is on treatment and has an undetectable viral load cannot transmit HIV to their partners sexually. And I'll dive a little bit more into that into detail, but this is the foundation of what U equals U is the definition. This is what we're talking about. It's all right here. How do we know U equals U? So here's a summary of recent evidence that has shown, out of all the studies that we've done, which I believe is well over 100,000 studies that show that persons who engage in condomless sex, who had a partner who was on treatment, had an undetectable viral load, were virally suppressed, same thing, that there was no transmission. The transmission risk is absolutely zero. 125,000 times. So that's a lot of sex. And I think that we have more than proven ourselves. The science is true, the facts are there. And this is how we got to know that undetectable does equal untransmittable. And here's why it's a game changer for us. It involves the well-being of people living with HIV because it transforms their social, sexual, and reproductive lives. We've seen people who have come forth to share their stories, to talk about how dating has been easier, how living without fear and knowing that they can reproduce and have children who won't contract HIV as well has been life-changing for them. The stigma, U equals U has dismantled stigma on so many levels, individual, community, clinical, and even public policy levels. If you're like me, you get a thrill when you're talking about public policy, and U equals U is a great mechanism to discuss public policy, to seek changes in our communities, whether that's funding, access to resources, or criminalization and so forth. This has been a game changer in that aspect as well. When we talk about treatment goals and getting persons who are newly diagnosed started on treatment, or finding folks who may have fallen off of treatment and for some reason, and getting them access to get re-engaged into care, it reduces the anxiety that's associated with HIV testing, and it adds that incentive that, hey, the sooner you get started, the sooner that we can get you to an undetectable viral load, and the sooner you relieve that stress and that worry of transmitting HIV sexually to anyone. And overall, the universal access, it provides a strong public health rationale to increase access and eliminate those barriers. And so that kind of goes back to that policy standpoint that I just talked about, and everything is when we talk about U equals U and we begin to share the information, it kind of gives us some leverage that, if this is going to be part of ending the epidemic that we all talk about, is to get persons to an undetectable viral load, we have to eliminate the barriers that are stopping people from getting there. The third U that we don't see, but it's very much there, alive and well, is U. It's universal access, and that's a part of our public health strategy because, as I said, it increases access to removes barriers to treatment, which improves the well-being of people living with HIV, which then prevents new HIV transmission, helps us end the epidemic, and it's all working together for one ultimate goal, which is ending the epidemic and improving the well-being of lives of people living with HIV. And some of our treatment goals. Excuse me. So, informed versus not informed, as you can see here, the adherence, that's moving a little faster than I expected. The mental health of people who were informed was a lot higher. The sexual health of people informed was a lot higher, and so forth. People who had a conversation about U equals U with a healthcare provider were 2 times more likely to report viral suppression, which means that after they had that initial conversation about U equals U, those folks were ready to get engaged into care, get on treatment, stay on treatment, and keep it going so that they can report back to their provider that they had reached, that they had had a viral suppression, and begin sharing the message and the information that they had received. 1 in 3 persons, however, were not aware of U equals U, which is a disservice that is being done by providers in some places because they do not or have refused to share the information.
We on track? Just one
Yes.
thing. Did you go a little bit slower?
Slower? Okay. I'm sorry about that. Of course. Not a problem. I apologize. I'm sorry.
Just for our interpreters too.
Okay, I got you. So why did we need the U equals U campaign? There was a lack of access to information, a lack of expertise and authority and disposition to draw and promote a conclusion that we found, paternalism, prejudice, sex negativity, and a resistance to change. So these are all just bullet points that we're going to dive into a little bit more and talk about how we got here and how we got to the science and why the actual campaign that is centered around this science came about and why it was needed for us to share this information. The basis of all of this is that the people who were living with HIV were and are now being informed about U equals U, especially those who are already marginalized by healthcare systems. These people, us, we were not getting the information that was already out there, the information that scientists knew, the information that providers knew. There was no way that was, I guess you could say, trendy and so forth for them to continue telling this information and sharing this with the masses. So that's how the campaign really came about, is because we saw that there was a disservice being done and that this information needed to become readily available to share with all persons, regardless, actually, of their HIV status. All people with HIV have a right to accurate information about their social, sexual, and reproductive health. Again, this is how we got to the point of creating the U equals U global campaign, is to ensure that these persons everywhere were able to have access to this information, and that we or someone, advocates and activists, were sharing this information because it appeared that those in power were not. Also, HIV stigma is a public health emergency, and U equals U is an immediate and effective public health solution in response to that emergency. And so, again, kind of reiterating what I just said about why it's been important to share this, is because it wasn't being done in this field of public health at first until the U equals U campaign came about. Either tell the truth or we'll tell it for you. And when we say this, what we're conveying is the simple fact that as advocates and activists in this field, we're willing to share the science and the truth, whether providers are wanting to do it or not, whether health agencies or clinics are sharing the information or not. It's up to us to continue sharing this truth and ensuring that we're doing a service and not a disservice to our community and to people who are living with HIV. Because it seems as though people who are living with HIV in this field have been put on the back burner. Even when we're talking about prevention, access to care, PrEP, amongst other things, is that we're forgetting to share this information to help the overall well-being of lives of people who are actually living with HIV, which is why it's imperative that we continue to shout it to the rooftops and let the world know that U does equal U. Bringing the U equals U science to the people, beginning in January of 2016, there was a consensus statement and some research done by activists and advocates in this field, along with doctors and researchers who did the overall consensus statement to get to finding out that an undetectable viral load equals an untransmittable person, a virus that cannot be transmitted sexually. You guys hear this? One second, I'm not sure why it's not playing. Okay, let me see.
Or virally suppressed for me. Started treatment, and within 30 days, my viral load became undetectable.
Been living with AIDS since 2008, undetectable since within about 3 months of my hospitalization.
I'm here today to share with you what it means for me to live with an undetectable viral load. Being undetectable or virally suppressed for me means that I can wake up every day knowing that everything is going to be just fine.
A lot of the language around HIV transmission rates is murky and is designed to make people more afraid.
A lot of people are using antiquated information to talk about
Undetectables. Started.
So that video is really important because it's from a community standpoint. It's from a standpoint of real people who have been living with HIV for some time, who are talking about how this campaign, how this movement has actually changed their lives. We're not just saying it, as you can see, real people are also saying it as well, and how this has become a game changer in so many ways to so many different people across the globe. In July of 2016, we had our first partners who began to share this information here in the US, the New York City Health Department, as well as over in the UK, Terrence Higgins Trust began to share this information, and we're ready to jump on board before this became a trending topic, a trendy thing. And it showed us that, there are organizations out there who actually care about people, care about the well-being of people who are living with HIV and so forth. This slide right here is to show you about different areas and different countries across the world who have just blew U equals U out of the water by wanting to share the information far and wide and ensured that everyone in their countries and in their respective communities knew about this message, because it's important and it's imperative to the well-being of all of us. Here's another video. Let's see if it's gonna play for you guys. I love this screen.
Stigma, no science, U equals U, reference everywhere, U equals U.
So I love that slide. As you can see, there's a lot of activations that were going on there. And it just brings a breath of fresh air to know that everywhere at different places all over the country that this is actually being taken serious, and people, actual activists and community members are wanting to share this information with everyone. As of December the 2nd, we have reached 1,013 organizations from over 102 countries that have signed on to agreeing to share the U equals U message in ways that work for their communities. If you guys go to our website, you can find this actual map available. That's preventionaccess.org. And you can find this information on there where you can find other community partners and organizations that have signed on to our campaign, and even collaborate with these organizations on ways to push the campaign in your communities, in your state, in your regions, and so forth, to continue amplifying the voices of those persons living with HIV and to ensure that we are getting to an undetectable viral load. You can zoom in, you can even try to go specifically to those organizations and find out information about them from this website as well. Here's another look at all the countries that have actually signed on. Again, we're at 102, which is absolutely amazing that all of this can happen in 4 years. You can also find our public health jurisdictions by state and municipalities, and the international public health jurisdictions on our website as well. Now, we're talking about, those in this field who have been able to share the information and those who are actually really credible. It's important, and it makes me feel extremely great to know that we've had people on our side, such as the director of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who, if you've seen him in the news, quite frankly, almost every day this year, talking about COVID-19 and so forth. But before that, we got here, Dr. Anthony Fauci said that the science really does verify and validate U equals U back in 2017. From a practical standpoint, the risk is zero. And when someone is undetectable, not only do we save the life of that person, we make it, in fact, impossible for that person to transmit. And lastly, from one of the most amazing quotes that he has ever said is that U equals U is the foundation of being able to end the epidemic. And this was caught on camera. Dr. Anthony Fauci said this in the International AIDS Society 2019. And it's amazing to know that we have people like Dr. Fauci in our corner who is validating and an incredible source to say that this is true. The risk is zero, and this is going to help us end the epidemic once and for all. U equals U is also verified at the highest levels from the CDC and so forth. We've seen them say that it's confirmed in 2017. They said effectively no risk. However, in 2019, the CDC switched to indicate that U equals U is 100% effective, and they authorized messaging flexibility to include U equals U as of August 2019. And they've integrated U equals U into their treatment guidelines in December of 2019. So the CDC, these other federal organizations and review outcomes have showed that that this is it. This is going to help us get to zero and change the tides in which we're heading towards for the epidemic overall. Let's see here. People who have achieved also and maintained undetectable viral loads cannot transmit HIV to their partners sexually. This is from the World Health Organizations and PEPFAR and all these other organizations that are really credible sources that have shown and said, that the risk is zero, and also that it's important to raise awareness and promote the knowledge about U equals U. How are we doing? This slide is really important to talk about and to kind of pinpoint, because as we're talking about, this conversation about, folks in the South, only 12 to 18% of residents across 7 states here in the South believe U equals U. And that's kind of alarming, because it means that either folks still aren't getting the proper education that they need, the messaging is not being conveyed in a way in which it should be, which we'll talk about later on how to communicate U equals U properly, or that there's someone somewhere in some of these states, whether it's a physician, a doctor, a clinician, whatever, providers are not providing the information. And so when folks hear this for the first time, they're kind of like, I don't know if I believe that. So it's important that we change this number and increase that to 100%, or as close as we can get. Also, among 38% of MSM who agreed that U equals U was completely accurate, only 31 and 39% believe transmission risk is zero. As I said, there's still a level of distrust here with some folks, and it's alarming to know that, because as we said, the science has proven, the studies have proven, incredible sources from Dr. Fauci, Dr. Allison Rogers, and so many other world-renowned doctors have agreed and let us know that this is actually true. Also, we found from our Owning HIV survey that a partnership that we engaged with Merck Pharmaceutical was that only 31% of HIV positive respondents reported U equals U accurately. And only 28% of HIV negative millennials said they have avoided hugging, talking to, or being friends with someone living with HIV. So again, sharing the message around U equals U is going to help dismantle some of this stigma, fears, and misconceptions around HIV, which is why it's important that we can continue sharing the message and continue this movement overall. Challenges to U equals U. We're talking about STIs, comprehension, blips, irrelevance, dishonesty, and getting to zero. So now we have to talk about choosing facts over fear. What we recognize is cognitive dissonance is a thing, right? The old ways of thinking versus the new ways of thinking. And that creates a level of somewhat fear, I would say, versus the facts. So as human beings, we're trained to continue thinking in a certain way. Once we're set in our ways, sometimes that's what we think. What we believe is what we were told at first. If we haven't been told this and we haven't heard it repeated over and over and it's new, we kind of become fearful of things that are unknown or new, or that we don't know too much about. However, with knowing that, we have to separate our feelings from the fact. So although we might not feel that, hey, this is for me, this is not for my community, or whatever those feelings are, we have to separate from the facts that are presented here, that the science is true, that anyone who is on their treatment, that is taking their medication daily as prescribed by their doctors and has reached an undetectable viral load cannot transmit the virus. The risk is zero. Those are the facts, and we have to stick to the facts over feelings. Also consider the positive and negative impacts. So what good is it doing by not sharing the information? Are you harming the community? Are you harming yourself and those around you, your loved ones? Most likely the answer is yes, by not sharing the information. The positive outcome of sharing the information is that you're decreasing stigma. You're making the education readily available to those who need to hear it. You're making it easier to have conversations around HIV and sex in general. And you're increasing the well-being of lives of people living with HIV. The negative impacts of sharing it, there are none. Borrow confidence from the experts. So as you've just seen recently, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the CDC, the World Health Organizations have all signed on. If for some reason you feel like, when you want to convey this message, you don't feel fully confident in sharing it, by all means, feel free to quote these credible resources. Quote Dr. Anthony Fauci, quote the World Health Organization, quote the CDC. Use these resources and these outlets to share the info and get the information out there to everyone. Now let's talk about U equals U around the world. I showed you guys briefly a little, snapshot of what it's looked like and what the people look like in various countries who are pushing the U equals U messaging out there. But we haven't talked too much about the specific campaigns as you see in this background around U equals U in various places around the world. Here are some of the campaigns that we've seen in different places around the globe. At the bottom of the screen, you can see this different organizations, London, Scotland, the UK, and other places that have shared this information and pushed out campaigns, whether it was locally, regionally, or nationally. And this is absolutely just amazing. Here is a global campaign that was pushed out, I want to say last year before, earlier on in the campaign, in the movement, that became a national movement. And it's amazing to know that folks over in Vietnam would take this, and as you can see, it's K equals K, but make this a huge thing, make this something that was supposed to be shared and was shared on a national scale. And I just can't wait for the day that we see that happen here in the US. I believe it's coming soon. And I'm excited about that. But it kind of gives us a little bit of hope to see kids talking about this information, to see this on national stages being shared and talked about in more ways than one, and discussed in rooms with powerful people in their country, to continue sharing this information as it should be. Here's a campaign from Golo San Antonio, here in San Antonio, Texas, that has put the information in Spanish. And so I do encourage any of you who are looking for outlets or other organizations that might already have some materials in Spanish to reach out to myself or any one of my colleagues to help you navigate to find that information or identify those organizations that would be able to help you get some information in Spanish, or that you could possibly collaborate with to get more campaign materials in Spanish. And we'd be glad to help you navigate that as well. Here are two more, one from the UK and one here in the US, where they're talking about HIV transmission. The one in the US here is in DC, which has been absolutely amazing as it relates to sharing the U equals U messaging. They just implemented, as of yesterday, I believe, the DC Health Department and the mayor announced that U equals U would become part of their guidelines and something that they would have implemented into those guidelines in their Ending the Epidemic plan, which is absolutely groundbreaking and innovative. So kudos to DC for that. Here's Golo San Antonio again, and also New York City. Also, yeah, you guys, you can see the diversity in communities and how each one, it fits these prospective communities, right? So if you ever see folks talk about, oh, U equals U is just for one community, it doesn't fit everyone. Here are examples that absolutely debunk that myth and show you that U equals U is for all of us, is for everyone, regardless of your gender, race, sexual identity, ethnicities, and so forth. U equals U is a human rights movement. We have Dublin also, other places in New York, as I said. Let's see here. these campaigns are just absolutely amazing. I'm just going to skip through to catch up on time. I love the Undetectable Man in this video right here. And we're going to see another one in just a second that I'm going to show you guys. I do want to play these songs really briefly so you guys can hear.
With you, because you, we can, we la li la, we ne no ka, we la li la, keep on fighting. We la li la, we ne no ka, we la li la, keep on fighting.
Okay, that was it. So as you guys can see, U equals U is huge in all parts of the world. Folks have created videos, music, campaigns, and so forth to show how important and how imperative it is that we continue sharing the message and the movement. Here are a few of the videos with notable sources here in the United States, as well as over in the UK. We got Jonathan Van Ness from Queer Eye sharing the information on his social media. We have Mayor Pete Buttigieg, former presidential candidate, talking about U equals U on CNN, and so many others. Our founding executive director, Bruce, talking with Prince Harry, and so many others. This is just a few of the celebrities that we've seen in the past talk about U equals U. So also what we're seeing is U equals U being mentioned on dating apps such as Grindr, and I'm sure they're now being talked about in other apps as well, but it's just it's groundbreaking to know and to see that even dating apps are taking the health and the lives of folks living with HIV serious, and that they're making it a thing to talk about this and to present it in a space where folks are that they call this, you know, the hookup sites or the dating sites, and so that it makes this having this conversation easier. And they're also providing information on their sites as well. Here is a campaign, a series that was one of the first that pharmaceutical companies that partnered with the Prevention Access Campaign, which was ViiV Healthcare, to produce the Positive series, where people living with HIV who had an undetectable viral load could share their stories with the world, basically, through this outlet. And so if you go to positiveseries.org, you can find out more information about this specific campaign in particular. Skip ahead. Okay, now for the meat of this. So I'm gonna talk really briefly and try to get into this about the U equals U communications. And so as I said earlier about communicating U equals U, it's imperative to know and to learn how to effectively communicate U equals U and understand the guidelines around U equals U, which we refer to as TLC, which is treatment, labs, and care. And so getting folks into treatment, that's the first step into discussing, you know, a person reaching an undetectable viral load is finding the treatment that works for them, getting them on treatment, and ensuring that they stay on treatment. And then also monitoring your labs. So getting your labs regularly done as often as prescribed by the doctor or your physicians, and also ensuring that folks are staying into care, actually caring about these persons and going beyond just, you know, healthcare, but also caring to ensure that these persons have the resources that they need to continue staying on treatment. So that's transportation, that's employment, housing, and things that we consider determinants of health that, you know, stop people from getting here. And so that all wraps up into one to ensure that, you know, folks are able to reach and continue staying at an undetectable level. When we're talking about undetectable, it's measuring less than 200 copies that are found of the virus in your body. And we're also focusing on sex. That's what U equals U is about. It's about sex, but also ensuring that folks are able to have these conversations around the most vulnerable and intimate parts of their lives, right? Which is sex. And that it's healthy, it's an easy conversation. It's a conversation that, you know, they're no longer afraid to have with their partners and providers. And we're specifically talking about HIV. So when you're mentioning U equals U, and we talk about, you'll see here in a little bit about condom usage or the lack thereof, there's no need for condoms when you're talking about HIV transmission and undetectable, a person with an undetectable viral load. That's what we're talking about is HIV. That's it. That's all that our studies have shown and have research has been about, is specifically HIV, sex, and a person with less than 200 copies of the virus in their bodies. Communicating U equals U. So we have 4 C's that we live by, which are being clear, confident, consistent, and conscious about communicating the message. And so these 4 C's will kind of give you the basis going forward of how to better communicate U equals U with your partners or with the community, with your providers, and everywhere else. So there's certain things that you do want to say when you're talking about communicating U equals U effectively, and that's being very clear. And that's saying things like, you can't pass it on, you can't transmit, it does prevent HIV, it is impossible, 0 risk, and it's 100% effective. Things that you don't want to say include negligible, extremely unlikely, helps prevent, virtually impossible, or close to 0. One, all of these things that are on the right side are false. And also they leave room for error or for questioning around whether or not the information that is presented around U equals U is true or not, it's factual or not. But it is, and we know it is because we have the science to back it and to prove it. Dr. Anthony Fauci has been great, like as I said earlier, about communicating U equals U effectively. He said the risk is 0. It's impossible for that person to transmit. Dr. Allison Rogers has been also great. She said the risk is 0 as well. And it's very, very clear that the risk is 0. The British HIV Association has also been one of the ones that has been on board and, has communicated this really effectively by saying no risk or 0 risk of sexual transmission of HIV. So notice the words in red. There's no room for questioning or doubt and so forth. It's very firm and we're sticking to that. Also, the CDC has said 100% effective. Being confident. It's imperative that we talk about confidence when you're communicating this because people know when a person is confident or not when you're presenting or talking about something that you truly do believe in. Don't say I believe in U equals U, but use a condom or PrEP just in case. What you do want to say is condoms or PrEP aren't clinically necessary to prevent HIV with U equals U. You don't want to say things like you're only good as your last viral load test because if that's true, then if my last viral load test was showing that I'm undetectable, well, then I'm still undetectable. You do want to say things like, if you're taking a medication that's prescribed by your doctor and having regular viral load tests, you don't need to worry. That relieves the stress because it's true, it's factual. If I had my viral load test done 6 months ago and I've continued the same regimen, the same, adherence to my medication as I had before that got me to an undetectable viral load, then I don't need to worry because I know for a fact and I trust myself and I'm confident in the things that I've been doing that my viral load is still undetectable. You don't want to say you never know because we do in fact know because we have the science to prove it and the providers who have backed us and the professionals in this field who have also backed us to say that we do know. Consistent. Being consistent. Change is uncomfortable, especially for human beings. And as I said earlier, we have to take our old ways of thinking and move them into new ways of thinking, but this can sometimes cause discomfort. And that's when we get into that cognitive dissonance that we talked about, because we're so used to looking at things out of one lens. And when something new comes along, it's like, wait, like slow down. But it's imperative to change those things and feel that discomfort. Change is supposed to be uncomfortable, but change is also good. U equals U must be heard repeatedly from the right messengers and credible sources. We provided you guys with some of those sources. You guys are all going to be the messengers going forward because you're learning how to communicate this effectively. And you know the language that you should and should not use going forward. You want to use targeted channels, including social media, outreach activities, patient information, waiting rooms, clinical waiting rooms, newsletters, and treatment guidelines to continually sharing this information. And I'll talk about the clinical waiting rooms in just a second and why it's imperative that when you're there, that you see U equals U messaging or raise a concern. You also want to make U equals U central to speeches and events like AIDS Walk, World AIDS Day, and other public events. Because it's imperative that now we're at a point where we're changing the tide and we're working towards seeing the epidemic. So every holiday, every awareness day centered around HIV or AIDS needs to have some type of language around U equals U presented when you're speaking, when you're tweeting out, your social media channels, or whatever the events may be centered around these days that we talk about. And have a conversation with those living with or vulnerable to HIV at every opportunity, even at a bar. We've seen guys, you're gonna see a video in just a second actually, so let me wait on that, hold on. Be conscious. At Prevention Access Campaign, we understand that viral load does not equal value. And with that, that comes from a place of leading with love. And also empathy and understanding that there are people out there for some reason who have not yet been able to reach an undetectable viral load. And with that, the reason why we raise this to a concern is because whether it's that 400,000 that has not yet been able to access care, or it's people who have been into care but not able to adhere to the care that they've been prescribed or should follow because of racism, systematic racism, unemployment, the other social determinants of health. These things are a factor that we need to address. But first, in order for us to address them, we have to call it out. We have to understand what's there, come from a place of love, address these issues so that we can get these persons to an undetectable viral load. Again, structural, social, and emotional barriers make it difficult for people to stay and start treatment, especially from marginalized communities. And also understand that no one with HIV is a danger. All people with HIV have options for safer sex, such as condoms, and in some parts of the world, PrEP. Treatment is a personal decision and not a public health responsibility. But also, as I said, leading from a place of love means reaching out to my neighbors, to those who I care about, to ensure that they have what they need so that they can also reach an undetectable viral load. And use a public health strategy of U equals U to increase access and remove barriers of information, treatment, and care so people with HIV can stay healthy and be free from worry about transmission. And we also talk about V does not equal B, viral load does not equal value. We're saying that we're leaving no one behind. This is another campaign that I'm going to show you guys really briefly. It's the Undetectable Man. If you've been at any conferences, national conferences in the United States, you have seen this man walking around somewhere, and here we go. This clip actually goes on a little bit longer, guys. But what I like about the Undetectable Man is we see a person from marginalized communities, a Black man, a Black queer man, walking around, making it a topic of conversation, even in a bar setting, around undetectable and what that means, and making it easier, for dating. I mean, for him, it just happens, and people flock to him. Providers must inform patients about U equals U. There's no medical justification for providers not wanting to share U equals U. It's actually a form of malpractice, and they're doing a disservice to their patients and the community overall by not sharing this information. Conveying benefits and risks surrounding any treatment is fundamental to patient decision-making, and this HIV treatment benefit should be no exception. Then medical providers must also be educating patients about U equals U, about optimal adherence, viral suppression, and treatment satisfaction. And educating all patients around U equals U is crucial to maximizing the well-being of people living with HIV. The consequences is, a few of them anyways, are telling someone that they are infectious when they are not is negligent, unethical, and harmful. So if a provider is telling you that you reached an undetectable viral load, or you hear someone saying that a provider told them that they reached an undetectable viral load but are still infectious, it's completely factual. I mean, and not factual. It's false information, and they are harming that person and the community overall. And it's malpractice to withhold or defy life-changing information. And if patients, like if any of you are on this call are just now hearing about U equals U, and you've been going to a doctor, provider, and have not heard it yet, it kind of makes it harder to trust your provider, because it's like, why are you withholding this information that I should have been told from the beginning? And they know about this, they do. And it also creates opportunities to improve personal and public health. It's going to be wasted. This is a chance for patients and the public to believe their providers and develop a trusting relationship with providers. And that opportunity becomes wasted when they don't share all the information that is necessary for people living with HIV. As we get ready to close, I want to show this last clip of Dr. Allison Rogers, who you guys will see address U equals U at the International AIDS Conference in 20.
There are many providers that are still not accepting this message. They try to focus on the risk is not zero scientifically, or they focus on their patients aren't going to be adherent and they won't know that they're detectable, or they say there's a rise of STIs already, so they don't want to share this with their patients. We get every single kind of excuse. What would you say to clinicians or any other information provider who is withholding this information from people with HIV?
Yeah, and I just want to pay tribute to the U equals U campaign. It's been astonishing. I think the time for excuses are over. I think it's very, very clear that the risk is zero. Okay. So I very much think we have to promote this. I think if you're on suppressive ART, you're sexually non-infectious, and yeah, the time for excuses is over.
She said it best. That's, as a provider is telling you that the time for excuses is over. So we encourage all providers, all community members, activists, and so forth to share the information far and wide and do a service and do justice to our community by continuously sharing the information, sharing the correct messaging, and continuing the movement going forward. And on behalf of the Prevention Access Campaign, I want to say thank you to you all for joining in with us today. Join our campaign by going to preventionaccess.org/community, where you can sign up to become a community partner by signing on to our consensus statement, and someone from our organization will then reach out to you. As the partnerships manager, I might also reach out to you as well to talk about potential partnerships and how to increase awareness and visibility in your communities. Learn the facts, share the great news, and always remember to leave no one behind. My name is Deondre Moore. My contact information is at the top of the screen here. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, email. Feel free to tweet the Prevention Access Campaign on Twitter at PreventionAC. And continue using the hashtag that U equals U.
Thank you so much, Deondre, for this very informative session, especially at a time where science is being attacked from all angles. So we thank you so much for presenting the facts and the science behind U equals U. We do have a few questions that have entered both the chat and the Q&A feature that I will ask, and we have some time to do that. So thank you all for your questions. And if you have questions, more questions, feel free to enter them both in the chat and the Q&A feature. So our first question comes from Luis Nevades, who says, is viral load level not the same in all fluids? If a person is undetectable in the blood, can they transmit HIV through semen or vaginal fluids?
So what our studies have shown is that that's how we measure undetectable is through the blood. So that's how you get your lab work done. And that's when we measure the copies of the virus in your bodies. And so that's what our consensus statement has shown, is that they cannot transmit if they've had an undetectable viral load that's been reported through their labs, that they cannot transmit through vaginal secretion, through semen, or any other ways sexually. And that's all that we know is about sexually. We aren't sure about breastfeeding. We aren't sure about, the mother-to-child transmission as it relates to undetectable. All we can talk about is specifically is sexual transmission, and the risk for that is zero.
Thank you so much. Our second question comes from Eduardo Ocampo, who says, and this is more of a question. He says, although I am all for you equals you, I have heard that some people living with HIV may find this stigmatizing since not everyone is able to reach an undetectable viral load. And I think that was just more of a comment than a question.
Yeah, it's about the stigma. So that's why we also developed the concept that viral load does not equal value. So while some folks might say that it's stigmatizing, it's a malpractice and it's a disservice to not continue sharing this science and information to people. We know that. We've addressed it, that we know that not every person has been able to reach an undetectable viral load for various reasons that do not include the science. It's more around the social determinants and so forth, and using U equals U as a mechanism to empower and to navigate change around access to resources is a really strong tool when we're discussing the people who have not been able to reach an undetectable viral load and how to address that. And so I won't say that it's stigmatizing. I don't think that it's necessarily stigmatizing, but I do think it raises the question and it continues the conversation around the lack of access and quality that's needed for people to continue getting access to reach an undetectable viral load, if that makes sense.
Thank you. And Bruce Richmond added in the chat, it's common for there to be HIV RNA or DNA in genital fluids that has no impact on transmission risk. I'll send the document from the NIH on this issue, and they did present that. A few people asked about how they could access the videos and the songs that were played in your presentation. Are they able to email you to get that information?
Yeah, you guys email me. They're on YouTube. They're also, you can find them on our websites at preventionaccess.org. I'll put that in the chat. Also, yes, feel free to email me. I'll include my email in the chat and the website as well.
Thank you. There were a few questions that were asked in Spanish, so I was going to Google to the Spanish-English translation and getting the best possible translations for that. Luis also asked, if an undetectable person becomes ill with a cold, influenza, or any other illness, would they cease to be undetectable?
No, that won't change that. As long as even with that cold and everything, you're still being adhering to your medication and you're taking your medicine as prescribed by your doctor, those things will not change your undetectable viral loads. You have no worry. You can live life free of worry, knowing that you are still going to be undetectable.
And I'm grateful for that question, because we often hear this when we go into our doctor's offices that says, if you have a cold, that can bump up your viral load or your CD4 count down a few notches, and you might not get a true reading of your numbers if you have a cold or a flu or stuff like that. So thank you so much for that question, and thank you for the answer. Another comment from Pedro Hernandez that says, the key is in education and in informing people that because viral load is low or undetectable, it does not mean that the virus had disappeared. And then another comment came from William Newton that says, U equals U and PrEP should be a revolutionary talk on all pop culture and social media outlets, as well as hookup apps. Can you say more about that, even though that was a comment?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think we all would agree. The more that we see U equals U being talked about and being pushed out there in various forms of outreach, is going to be amazing for people living with HIV and people who might have an HIV negative status, because we're dismantling the stigma, providing the correct information that's needed and that should be provided to people out there. And it's just all around, it's a great way to continue pushing the information. And so every chance you get, if we could see U equals U every corner you turn, that's where we want it. If we could have this information available to everyone at every chance that we could, it's just amazing.
Thank you. And that seems to be all of our questions. And again, from the Latino Commission on AIDS, the Hands United Department, we thank you so much, Deondre, for joining us and providing such wonderful information to all of those who are present here today.
I just have to say to Susan and to Erwin, I am so sorry if I was going too fast. I apologize. I was looking at the time and I was like, I gotta get through before 10:30 my time. So I'm sorry for speeding through that. But I think that this has been recorded, correct?
Yes, it is being recorded. For those who are asking, copies of the recording and the information will be available a few days, both in English and Spanish after today's session. Our next webinar starts at 12 noon. It's about unmasking HIV criminalization. You can find us on handsunitedcba.org to register for that particular webinar. And I'll turn this portion back over to our technical host, who is our co-director, Bolo, who will launch another poll for us.
Thank you. And thank you, Deondre. Excellent presentation. Thank you for your availability. Thank you, Sean, for a great moderation part. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Yes, a quick poll is just to check about interpretation, similar to the one that we had at the beginning. Here it goes. Let us know how it works for those who access interpretation. This helps us improve. And also for everyone, at the end of this, as we close this webinar, you'll receive an overall evaluation for this session. Again, thank you so much. And we'll see you soon. Thank you, Deondre.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.